In property management, I find about 500 units, you're going to completely break. You got to put a lot more money in to hire the
I broke
team.
before 500. I'm just saying.
But I mean, it's like there's stepping zones. Like I find, and there is a break before that, but like 750 and then 1,000. And then to continue to level up, you got to continue to be willing to break it and go, okay, this only worked for this. Now I got to break it, reanalyze it, revamp, and continue. Otherwise, you either stay or you start diminishing.
Welcome to the Property Management Brainstorm Show with Bob Preston. Bob is the lead consultant and podcast host at Property Management Brainstorm, the consulting and strategic planning company dedicated to the property management industry. This podcast is for property managers and company owners seeking an in-depth look into current trends toward adding doors, growing recurring revenue, and building a high-profit property management business. You'll hear from leading professionals on hot topics, success stories, and strategies for expanding your company and assuring your property portfolios are managed efficiently. Now, here is your host, Bob Preston.
Hello, brainstormers. This is Bob Preston, your host, broadcasting from our Property Management Brainstorm studio in Del Mar, California. If you're new here, please subscribe so you get ongoing access to all of our great episodes. And if you like what you hear, please pay it forward with a positive review. Before we dive in today, I would like to give a quick shout out to our amazing sponsors for helping to support the podcast: Upkeep Media, SureVestor, VPM Solutions, RentScale, Second Nature, Showdigs, Blanket, APM Help, Z Inspector, and today's feature sponsor, LeadSimple, who you will hear more about in a brief midroll about halfway through the episode. So today's episode will be a little bit different. On most podcasts, including this one, content typically focuses on steps and things to do for improving, getting better. In other words, succeeding, whether that be in property management or any other type of business. I watched an interview recently with George Clooney, the actor, and he said he never learns anything by succeeding, but rather he always learns a lot when he fails from his failures, right? On today's episode, my guest is Tiffany Rosenbaum of Gilbert, Arizona, who is the co-founder of Rosenbaum Realty Group, Repair Masters, and a short-term rental company, Stunning Stays. While this may seem counterintuitive, Tiffany and I will discuss property management failures. We'll unpack learning from failures and mistakes and why this is so important in the property management business. This is going to be a great episode, so have a listen. Welcome to Property Management Brainstorm.
Thank you for having me, Bob. It's exciting.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this because we were chatting about this before we started. You know, I'm certain we've crossed paths before in this industry, but we've never actually met. So this has been fun. And I just want to thank you so much for being here. I always like to start with my guests introducing themselves. So let's roll with that. And can you please tell our guests about yourself?
Yes, my name is Tiffany Rosenbaum. I'm out of Arizona, originally from Texas, born and raised, but have started 3 different companies and love doing it and love to speak about the challenges that come with that, because I think the true story behind any entrepreneur has a lot of struggle, and I want to put that out there, that it's okay to have struggle. So
yeah,
that's a little bit about me.
When we started chatting about this podcast and topics we could discuss, you floated the concept of property management failures. I think it's kind of an interesting topic, right? Because as I said in my preamble, most podcasts focus on success and how to get better and all this kind of stuff. And I'm sure we'll touch on that today too. But why did you suggest this topic? And why is it something that's so important, I think, for us to discuss?
Because I think we put out there what we see on social media. We see all the perfect, everybody's having success, right? No one has failures, but in reality, every single person has a story. Anybody that is successful has had a lot of failures because they've learned every shot they don't take, they fail anyways. They don't win. So to win, you've got to be able to fail and learn from it and grow from it and understand that it's part of the process. And I really do enjoy telling people about the fails because I'm hoping that they can learn from my failure and skip that step so they get farther in the game a lot faster.
Right. Yeah. Some people don't want to reveal their vulnerabilities or the places where they may have failed or struggled. Right. One of the areas I always struggled with was kind of self-doubt. Like, am I doing this the right way? Am I sure about this? Oh my gosh, I wonder if people are going to think I'm an idiot, this kind of thing. And this because I'm really tough on myself. And so I think that was what kind of led to this, self-doubt aspect.
I think a lot of people have self-doubt and
Mhm.
they learn either they have to get a coach or they learn how to work through that. Because when you're an entrepreneur and you're a business owner, if you don't have partnerships, all of a sudden you have to figure out what decisions you're making and how you're going to make them and which way your company is going to go. And so if you're not careful, you can get into that self-doubt and you get into, is this the right decision? If it's not, I actually talk about that a lot. Like a lot of times we have to make a decision and run with it. And sometimes we learn that it's failure and we're going to learn and grow from it, or it was the right decision and we continue.
Yeah. I've been on a lot of podcasts too, as have you, and people have always asked me, well, what was it like starting your business? And I always compared it to sort of climbing a set of stairs, right? You take your first step based on maybe the things you've learned from other people, what you've heard, at NARPM meetings, whatever. But oftentimes in the early stages, you can't afford a lot of the resources that you might have later, as you grow the company, right? So you have tools and resources you can afford at the time, you implement those, and then, things eventually break, like whatever you've implemented breaks or fails, or you come up with some sort of a failure based on feedback you're getting. And then, you don't always know until you have that problem, right? So we regroup, we review, we reevaluate, the way we do things, and then take a step forward. And that's kind of that quantum leap up to the next step. And then you run for a while, something breaks, you get what I'm saying, right? With the stair step.
100%.
Can you relate to that analogy?
Oh, yes. In property management, I find about 500 units, you're going to completely break. You got to put a lot more money in to hire the team.
I broke before 500. I'm just saying.
But I mean, it's like there's stepping zones. Like I find, right. And there is a break before that, but like 750 and then 1,000. And then to continue to level up, you got to continue to be willing to break it and go, okay, this only worked for this. Now I got to break it, reanalyze it, revamp, and continue. Otherwise, you either stay or you start diminishing.
Yeah, I'm curious where you were at on this spectrum, because I've talked to a lot of property management owners who are like, I was always very conservative. Like I wanted things to be in place and I kind of wanted a solid foundation before I grew. So I was willing to spend in advance a little bit, maybe more than I should have. Other company owners are like, well, just sign all the doors. We'll figure the rest out later. Right. And then all of a sudden there's chaos, right? Bringing your team to the knees while you figure things out. Where are you on that spectrum?
Oh, now or when I started? That's two different answers.
Okay. Well, either. Maybe when you started.
Well, when I started from a place of no money, like couldn't feed my child, had no AC and heat on in the house. And
wow.
I started from an investor's aspect and then started to realize that there was a company behind this and decided to bring on owners. And when we brought on owners, we had no clue what we were doing. We were just bringing on owners. We got a part of NARPM. We were learning, but we were failing probably every day.
Yeah.
And then we realized, okay, and we were trying to hire the cheapest people. Like, how cheap can I get it? Because I want to make these margins. But in reality, it created turnover. It created chaos. And so then it was like, okay, we need processes, procedures. We need a audit team. We need all these things that develop my team, and realize the people are actually what elevate your company. It's not you. It's the team behind you. And so I took some time to actually understand that and realize that. It took me time. It wasn't like when I first started my company, oh yeah, my team's the best thing in the world. I probably lost a lot of really good players because I didn't understand that. And Same. I also fired people because I didn't give them the toolbox to be successful. And so now it's all about the team. It's all about the processes. It's all about the procedures. It's all about that. But when I started, no. It was probably a little bit of chaos because my husband and I were doing it. So really, we can do it. It's all in our head, right? Yeah, it wasn't the smartest thing, but we learn and grow from it.
Well, that's an interesting point because a lot of it depends upon what you can afford to do in the early stages. I mean, I was fortunate enough that I had the resources from another company that I've been involved in and did pretty well at, that I could invest up front, right? Not everybody can do that. It sounds like you couldn't, so you sort of have to bootstrap it. And maybe that's when you make all the mistakes, but you kind of learn, you get religion really quickly, right? On, okay, now wait a minute, we can't do this again. Let's, this is unacceptable. So let's figure this out. But that's really interesting. I mean, those are some of the stair steps we talked about just a minute ago, I think.
Mm-hmm. No,
Yeah.
100%. And yeah, you can bootstrap it, but I think what you said is very important. You got to invest in it. I think I had the mindset of how cheap can I hire someone because that means my bottom line will be better. But in reality, those two things don't equate, because when you hire the cheapest, you get turnover, you get unsuccess, you get chaos. But when you hire the people that have been in the industry or know it or have the education behind them, then all of a sudden they help elevate your company. So that's where we made the mistakes. And I obviously we didn't have processes and procedures when we started. So I was a little bit of a micromanager. It wasn't fun. It was made all the mistakes, but realized real quick, okay, that has to change. It has to be about the numbers. It has to be about KPIs and things like that.
Well, that's good. You learn that along the way. So, I mean, looking back then, what is the biggest failure or mistake, you've experienced in your businesses?
Oh, I could say a lot. There's a lot, but I think really micromanaging and not understanding that the people were what it's all about. I think that's where I started off wrong. I would micromanage and I'd ask them, hey, was this done today? And what I created was a bottleneck, because they would come to me and say, is this how it's done? And nothing was documented really well. So it was like, it became chaos and it became an unempowering place to work instead of an empowerment. And so realizing that, how I changed it was realizing that the people were number one. But that was my biggest issue, because we created a revolving door at the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's what's important to realize. Without the people, your company's not going to go anywhere.
That's really interesting, because I had some similar problems when I started my business, and I sort of called it the hub and spoke, right? You sort of, I was the hub of the wheel, and then the people were the spokes, going out to the wheel, and everything had to run through Bob.
Yep.
Right? Wrong way to run a company, right? And so once you have people that are in that mode, that's really hard to break, get them out of that mode. And so you're right. I mean, one of the ways we had to do that was by sort of having to eventually let people go and then bring people in who were capable of being a little bit more autonomy. And then I realized, wow, maybe I didn't really spend enough time training these people or giving them the time or the patience to get better at their job. So, I mean, I think that was my biggest failure along the way as well. And making hiring mistakes, right?
Oh man. Oh, I have one of the worst. That hiring mistake where it's like the worst hire you've ever had and you still get a pit in your stomach when you think about the person.
Yep.
Yeah, I've had that one, but it was in my accounting department, so it was even worse. It was,
oh my gosh.
It was bad. And I didn't have the documents or anything to prove, but I started auditing my bank account, started going down, and I was like, something's wrong here. And so finally I did have someone behind the scenes that came to me and said, hey, Tiff, here's all your proof. And I said, okay. And so I fired on the spot, but it took too long. And so it cost us a lot of money. But you talk about hiring, Starbucks has a 30, 60, 90-day hiring process.
Interesting.
And let's be honest here. They sell coffee and they sell a little bit of food. In the property management industry, your cycle is like 1 month. And how many of us actually train for more than a month? Most property management companies that I've talked to at conferences are like, a couple days.
Exactly.
I'll train
right.
for a couple days and then they're good. And so we throw them. We used to call it the fire hose. We used to say, just be ready for the fire hose. It's going to hurt for a little bit, but it'll be better. But I thought about that. I really looked at Chick-fil-A and I looked at Starbucks, and I'm like, they have such an intense training program. So does Ritz-Carlton. And I'm like, if they're doing it this way, there's something important about it. Yep. Because then they keep their people and their people find that it's important. So I feel like training was, yes, I made every mistake in the book on training. But I think that's one of the places where companies have to realize that no, you don't see the return right off the bat, but you do over time.
With LeadSimple, property managers manage more doors with less stress, all while providing amazing customer experiences at scale. LeadSimple uniquely combines its powerful sales CRM, shared inbox communications tools, and full-featured process management system into one consolidated platform, integrated with your property management software. Document, streamline, and automate all your company's processes to transform the way you work, save valuable time, and create raving fans, all while enabling scalable growth. Work with their team of process experts to learn how to build processes like a pro and train your team so you can get up and running quickly. Learn more at www.leadsimple.com. Yeah, I think I was probably batting around 500 on hiring, right? About one out of every two really stuck and landed. And then I think the other big failure I had or mistake was then when I knew that I had someone who was not right for the company, not handling that sooner, waiting too long. And I know I've had people on the episode, on the podcast episodes before where we've talked about this, and you have this sort of toxic person in the environment. And as a business owner, I would always recognize it, but I'm kind of like, well, it's not that bad. You make all these excuses for yourself, right? And then finally, when I would take action, I could just feel the relief on the team, almost like a veil was lifted, right? And even some people made the comment, well, it's about time. Why'd that take you so long? This kind of thing.
And you know what's sad about that? Normally, the reason why we don't fire them, as for me or for other people I've talked to, is like, I don't want to get thrown back into that position. Because usually the owner at the very beginning of the stages, not now, but as the owner, I find that people are like, but that puts more work on my plate. Really, in reality, it actually puts more work on your plate no matter what.
Right.
Because if you don't fire them, you're going to have to clean up the mess, which I find that if you keep someone on, every day you keep them, it's like $3,000 that you're losing because of the fact that that person is actually creating a bad work environment for other people. So you end up losing the good players because they don't want to be around the weak player either.
No question about it. And typically, if they're not the right person, they're not happy either, and they're probably causing more problems. And then you're right. This sort of cost of having the wrong person on your team just continues to go up every day. And I've learned that the hard way over the years, that it's almost better off not making a hire or not having a person in that role than having the wrong person. So, slow to hire, quick to fire. I guess that's the thing that I've learned, and really made a lot of mistakes along the way. So in my consulting business, I also see a few areas where problems arise or failures are made, mistakes, whatever we want to call them. And, tenant screening, lack of legal compliance. I mean, across the board, I've seen the full gamut. I mean, so just naming it too, what are some of the common aspects of the property management business where you see things can break down or fail?
Oh man. I find property management is like a domino effect. So I find if the first leg isn't working, the second one's not going to work. And so you almost have a whole thing of breakdowns unless you hit it first on the head. So for instance, like moving a tenant in. If you move them in and it's a horrible experience from the moment they move in, then all of a sudden you have an issue that almost an entire stay.
Yeah.
And then it costs the owner more money because guess what? If they move in bad, then they're nitpicking everything and then more maintenance requests are coming in. But then also, what does that do? That bogs down the team. So hitting up front and anticipating, and this is where I think property management has issues. We don't always anticipate the owner's need or the guest's need. The resident needs. We wait. And so it becomes a defensive instead of an offensive. And in big companies like Ritz-Carlton, Walmart, Amazon, what they do is anticipate. They want to anticipate what the customer needs, wants, and that way they create a wow factor. And so I know I completely answered that completely differently, but I feel like you can have a breakdown in every little bitty thing. Like maintenance is a huge breakdown if it's not ran smoothly. Leasing, owner communication can be a huge breakdown. We use Help Scout to make sure we can monitor that. And we love it. But I feel like we transitioned from Gmail because that was a huge breakdown because I couldn't monitor how fast our response was. I thought I knew, but without actual data, you don't really know, right?
No, it's an interesting response to the question though, because if you don't, pick your starting point, I think tenant move-in is a really good example, because then the problems can just continue to cascade through the entire tenancy, beginning with, okay, the person's already riled up. So then you're going to generate, more angst about the property condition, or maybe things aren't really great shape when you move them in. So then you have this ongoing, well, I'm going to show them, and it's like, it's almost never ending. And then your people, then they're having a hard time responding. So these problems or failures continue to cascade through the whole process. So I think that's a really good point.
And the same thing happens with owners. Like the property management company is so excited. They want to bring on this owner. So they're like, oh, you know what? He doesn't have a few papers. Not a big deal. I'll start advertising. I'll start working through this. But then what happens is the communication drops a little bit, meaning he still owes you stuff. You're doing stuff. So all of a sudden it becomes chaos.
Yep.
And then guess what? It's not the owner's fault. It's the property management company's fault.
Right.
And when you have an owner come on that is not smooth, that whole entire transition becomes chaos and becomes already distrust. And so the owner process of bringing someone on is so important to dive into. And we've made every mistake. We've made that mistake. Oh, just bring them on. We just want the properties. We just want the properties.
Sure.
And then we bring them on and it becomes chaos. And then guess what? They leave after a year anyways when their contract's done because the trust was broken from day one.
So is it possible to fight back against the failures and mistakes without becoming completely OCD in your business?
Oh, yes. I think when you're able to fight back off the mistakes, you have a very strong team and you create value and empowerment in your team. So I created a SWAT team. It's my data analysis, my process architect, and my audit team. And so they audit calls, they audit all these things and they get feedback from my team, the residents, and the owners. And so we're always evolving and realizing, hey, we want feedback so we can get better. If we're not asking feedback, then we can't get better. And it's always hedging the mistakes. No one's perfect, but we want to minimize the mistakes to get better. And that's what entrepreneurship is, right? It's trying to figure out, how do we continue to get better and not let the mistakes overtake our companies, really?
I like that because it's almost like a peer review too. Right? They're team members who are doing the auditing or who make up the SWAT team. So, you're allowing the team to point out the flaws or maybe the weaknesses in the processes and procedures that you've established instead of, you, Tiffany, saying, do it this way, it's got to be done this way, and being on top of every little point along the way.
Yeah, my audit team is pretty darn amazing, and I'm very grateful for them because they're over my culture, they're over my audits, they're over everything. Because as a business owner, we either create jobs for ourselves or we breathe life into the company and we step out. So we can create jobs or we can breathe life and go, okay, who do I need? What do I need to create this generating asset per se? And how can I empower my team to love it as much as I do?
So we've identified some problem areas, breaking points, and areas of common failure, and kind of talked philosophically about running a business. So what's the solution here? Let's talk a little bit about the flip side here. What do you do? And what are the main takeaways, I think, from this conversation?
To hedge the mistakes that companies make? I would say you gotta hire the SWAT team. I really do. No one really talks about it, but all the big companies have the auditors, they have the process architects, they have all these things. And so as I was researching Ritz-Carlton and Amazon and these big companies that were Fortune 500 and grow exponentially, I realized I needed a SWAT team. And I really don't think an owner can do it by themselves. It's not possible. Otherwise, you're working around the clock. Because I have 4 people on my SWAT team and they work 40 hours, sometimes longer, to make sure things run smooth. And so I do think hiring process architects, auditors, and data analysis so you have your numbers at your fingertips on a daily basis is key to hedge the mistakes companies make. Otherwise, we're always on the defense instead of offense. And you have to transition to the offense instead of defense if you want to hedge the mistakes.
Okay, so do they take it to the next step then and then put in place the procedures and processes and the workflow, if you will, because I mean, ultimately that's the solution, right? You have to have all this stuff in place and then have a way of kind of monitoring how your business is doing against those benchmarks, as you call it, right?
Mm-hmm. So we hired a process architect first, and then we developed the SWAT team. But so I don't build the processes. What they do, I am involved with them because I want my company to run a certain way. I have one meeting with them, they build it out, they audit it, and then they manage it. And then they also are over culture, and then they're auditing everything that goes into my property management system on a daily basis. So our property management system is Propertyware, and then we link up to LeadSimple for all of our processes and procedures.
Good.
And so they build all that out, they handle it, and then I just get reports. And then I have my data analysis individual that actually builds out all my data for all my companies into one location so I can see everything on Power BI.
Very cool. Now, LeadSimple, we've used that too, and I think it's a powerful solution or a powerful tool, powerful resource. Have you had any experience where people just don't go through the effort of using LeadSimple or log in and follow the process? And what happens, I guess, when that goes down? Like if someone's not really doing it the way the architects have outlined.
So that's why my architects are also over managing it and giving statistics on who's in it, who's not.
Okay.
If they're not, then it's a verbal, and then it's a write-up, and then it's a let go. I discuss this with my team. It's not an option. It's LeadSimple is a must, and either you're on board or you're not, because you can't put a system in and then only half your company do it. Otherwise it doesn't work. It breaks. Right. And it breaks horribly when you do it that way. Yeah,
I think that's a good point. And, obviously there's training up front. You've taught them how to use it. The architects have designed the processes. So that's fantastic.
I did not train my process architects. They went in and got trained from LeadSimple, and then it came through. I hired my second process architect that worked with a property management company. And then I had them train because I'm not a process architect. It would not go well. So I made sure someone could train them, because a business owner can't be good at everything. Yeah. It's not how it works. So you got to find the people that can train them and make sure it runs smooth.
Yeah, it's interesting because we had systems manuals in the beginning, and they were basically, in PDF files that were on the file server, right?
The books, the notebooks that we had. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, it was good that we had the processes captured, and I always had people come in and study them, and they had to sign off on, okay, here's your procedure. But, never did I see somebody in the middle of a job or middle of a day pull out the binder and go look to the specific page or try to find it. It would be completely impossible anyway, So the move to LeadSimple was huge. And I think for the most part, it was pretty easy, because once we learned how to program out LeadSimple, I had some people on my team who could take what was already in writing and then kind of implement it. And the other thing that I liked about LeadSimple was that you could correct it or fix it or alter it, modify it, if you will, in real time, versus the old PDFs. You had to release a new version anytime one little thing got changed, right?
Yeah, the PDFs were horrible. And like you said, no one really looked at them. So it became unusable. And so then guess what? It ended up coming to me. Questions came to me instead of it actually happening like it should be. I was the book instead of them actually using the book.
Right. Yeah. Or the person who was out correcting, like, hey, you didn't do it the right way. Let me show you where it is. And then you flip to the page and you point to, section 5, item 1. It's ridiculous. Right. So a lot of people are still doing it that way. And worse yet, some people that I know, that I follow in my business don't really have processes that are captured anywhere. It's still kind of floating around in people's heads. So those listening, take this as a word of advice. Hey, Tiffany, I'd love to keep chatting. I think this is really fun and a very passionate conversation. But in the interest of time, I'd like to wrap up today, because I know we both have things to do in our busy days. What other thoughts would you like to share with our listeners in wrapping up?
Be okay with the struggle, and be okay. Bring it in, harness it and get through it. Continue to grow and learn. No matter, we all went to high school or college. After college, get a PhD in the business that you're in, and keep running with it. Be excited about it, because you're going to have struggles, but on the other side, there's a beautiful rainbow waiting for you.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. And don't be afraid to be vulnerable and admit that you're struggling.
Everybody
that's
does,
key.
but I really appreciate you having me on, Bob. You are a joy to speak to, and I love the passion behind all this.
All right. It's awesome. Hey, and if someone wants to get in touch with you to chat a little bit more, learn more about it, how would they do that?
They can find me on Instagram and social media, but Tiffany Rosenbaum. And then you can actually have my email at tiffany@rosenbaumrealtygroup.com. And I answer all the questions personally that people reach out to me for.
Great conversation. This has been a pleasure having you on the show, Tiffany. Excellent episode today. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
As we wrap up today, I'd like to make a quick plug to our listeners to click on the subscribe button, give us a like, and if you would, please pay it forward with a positive review. Thank you for tuning in to Property Management Brainstorm, where we are always working hard to find new ways to advance the property management industry, and we will catch you next time.